Anyway, I'm Sherrie Dewitt, and I'm the convener of this group called the Task Force for Catch-Up Communication on Campus Development, which I refer to as the TF. And you'll have to excuse me, I am getting over COVID. So I have a cough here and there, and that's why I haven't been able to be present in person earlier today. This has been a really interesting journey for me, just in terms of nostalgia, because I came to St. John's the first Sunday that Steve Ellis was here. And it was a few months after that, I started hearing talk about this building and the so on and so forth. And I got involved, and it's been a real nostalgia trip for me to remember all this stuff.
Sherrie, what year would that have been?
Oh, don't ask me hard questions.
Fine. Sorry.
95, maybe.
Okay.
I don't know.
Just wondered.
Read the letter, you'll know.
And I was very involved in the process, and it was an extremely intense, interesting, and inspiring spiritual process for me, because every step of the way that I was involved in, we prayed all the time. Every meeting we started, every meeting we ended, meetings in the middle of which we prayed because we were having trouble coming to solutions and agreement. We'd pray for discernment. It's like having your spiritual life and your work life or your whatever all integrated. It was amazing. So different from my experience as a fiscal analyst at Cabrillo College, where politics and power plays were more important than the other, the kind of thing. And so it was a very collegial and faith-filled process as far as I was concerned. And it was really good to remember that. And it was really good to remember some of the stories, which I have been relayed to you in the written materials that we sent out. So today, Tom is gonna tell you a few things about how it feels to be new in this process, and then Chris is gonna go through the slides and all that kind of stuff, and I'm really looking forward to it because I've only seen glimpses of it, and it's fun. Tom?
Sure. I'm fairly new to the church. Kathy and I joined in 2018 after we moved to Santa Cruz. So we've been here about 3 years. So we know nothing of this history. You just come to the building the way it is and think it's fantastic, but we didn't know any of the backstory. And so Sherrie approached me back in September and said, we're forming this group that's going to look into the history and try and catch people up like me that don't know it all. And so I said, yeah, that sounds really interesting. I'd like to learn about it. And so she roped me in to be part of the team, of course. But no, it's been very enjoyable and educational. And what we've tapped into various people around the church that have been there for a long time. Of course, Sherrie and Chris, had a wealth of knowledge themselves. Mother Tracy helped out. Bill Kell, Roland Rebele from the fundraising standpoint. Let's see, Mary Nona and
Suzanne K.N.
Yeah. Suzanne Crackover-Nickel had the full history written down that's on the website. And so we pulled together a presentation that Chris is going to walk through, and it shows a lot of the history and it has some specific dates. It talks about what the fundraising was, how the money was spent, and takes us all the way up to the presence of where we are today. That looks like, okay, people are asking, well, should we be doing anything else with our campus development? And this is the starting phase of that, to figure out what do we want to do, what is our path forward, and how can we serve St. John's and the community.
Thanks very much. It's been fun to work on this, and I'm really looking forward to sharing these slides we put together. There's also a fun slideshow that shows the whole history. There are some 3D virtual reality walkthroughs that will take you on a quick tour of. I'm thinking this will probably take 50 minutes or so, depending on whether we have questions and whether I go slow or fast. So let's jump into this. I think it's really important to underscore. Let's see. This. Okay, can you see that?
No.
Not yet.
Can't see that. It's being paused.
We see a white stripe in the middle of the screen.
Okay, and I'm getting a warning from the live streaming. Resume share. There we go.
That looks good.
Okay. I think it's really important to understand that we're here really kind of telling a story about the past and where we have gotten to. This is not the process of figuring out what are we going to do going forward. That's really a step beyond where we are right now. And in fact, I think one way of looking at that is to put it in the context of recent discussion about discernment of our mission. In fact, back in 2018 and 2019, we went through an all-parish process. It was about 40 weeks of weekly meetings under the title of Vision 2025 to look at our entire mission, to articulate what were we trying to accomplish as people of Christ, what were we trying to accomplish in our service to the community and service to one another. And I'll talk briefly about that. That period of broad mission discernment was followed by chartering of the Architecture and Space Use Committee to go look at specific mission needs as it relates to our architecture. And that led over the last year into discussion across the St. John's vestry of what kind of a process would we use to discern our mission and to act as needed around the issues of space. That led the vestry to say, gosh, we need to bring everybody up to speed, and they chartered this communications team. So what you're seeing is the outcome of the last 3 or 4 months of work in gathering together that history. What comes next is anticipated to be some parish-wide discernment of whether to build. Is this the right time for us? In what direction should we go? Which starts in the spring. And we've retained Linda Buskirk as a discernment coach for that. She has a long history with the national church of working on helping parishes with discernment and the process of deciding what to build, and should there be fundraising and things like that. But right now we're really focused on the history to bring everybody kind of up to the same place. So why did we move from Capitola? We had this lovely little Victorian church hidden away on Depot Hill, which featured a grand total of 6 parking spots and really not very adequate sanctuary space or event space or kitchen space, especially when you had any of the big events,
Or bathroom space.
Or bathroom space. Yeah. It was really quite something. And moreover, it was not very accessible. People with limited mobility had a really hard time getting in and out of the church, or for even the parish hall. But especially the church was a problem because it was stairs on every entrance. So we had some real needs to move to someplace with more flexible space, a lot more parking, and the kind of facilities that we need to do the things that we found were important to us. From a timeline standpoint, it really is part of this continuity of who we are as a community from the time of the first founding, the first service of St. John's more than 130 years ago now, in 1889. One of the first goals of this community, which was mostly a summertime community in Capitola, when Camp Capitola was this weekend destination to get away from the city, was building a church. And what you saw is the Depot Hill Church, consecrated in 1899. The church operated as a mission and did not become a self-supporting parish until 1958. And within a few years after that, it was already identified that parking was a problem. And in fact, in the 60s, 70s, and into the 80s, the idea that we probably needed to move to become more visible, accessible, parking friendly, gradually developed until in the 1990s, the decision was made to purchase land, first to find land, then to purchase land. And in fact, this large piece of property that included the low-income housing, which is just to the west of the church today, and the area which is now across the street, the other housing and the skate park, were purchased together with the explicit intent to break it up into pieces, and most particularly to enable the housing authority to construct low-income housing on the western slice of that. And that went forward really quite smoothly, such that we were in position in the late 90s to start detailed planning, to select an architect, to work out in particular what we would build on this site. So that planning process went forward. We developed financing for it through the capital campaign and the expected sale of the Depot Hill site. And it was at that time that we started to identify that we probably could not build everything that we wanted with just the funding from a single capital campaign. So we really recognized that building in phases would be necessary, at least 2 phases, and that what we would build immediately would be phase 1 of that. From that concept, we went into the detailed design and permitting, the building of Canterbury Drive itself, which is actually a private road, which we jointly own with the other properties around us, and set the funding goals, effectively establishing that we would do fundraising over a 5-year period, meaning we would ask people to make pledges that would be payable over 5 years. And then we got a couple of loans, one a short-term loan just for the construction period, and then a longer-term loan, which allowed us to take the 5 years to get the actual cash. Of course, when you're building, you need all the money up front, but the pledges would come in over time. And we had a loan to bridge that timing. And in fact, there's a wonderful side story on how that was done. And there were 6 families that were effectively co-signers and guarantors of the loans to make sure that we could get the best loan from the banks. In May of 2008, we actually started the site development. The bulldozers came in. And in fact, there was a lot of work on the land itself, particularly when we discovered that there was more drainage problems, more water flowing through the site. And we had to dig pretty deep. And build an entire underground drainage system that you'll see in the slideshow coming up. But you sort of want to think that the church was just built on this meadow that we took over, but it's far from the truth, given what we discovered from the hydrological studies once we started to get into it. But that building went really pretty quickly. So in just 13 months from first breaking ground to being able to commission, consecrate the building. So in June of 2009, we marched with our flags and our cross from Capitola to Aptos. And the next Sunday, on exactly the 120th birthday of the parish, celebrated the first feast of St. John the Baptist in Aptos. Within a few years after that, as expected, all the loans were paid off, and that really completed phase one of the building. But of course, our mission doesn't hold still. So shortly thereafter, we went through this vision process to sort of establish, well, where are we going from here? Not fundamentally about what do we build, but what are we really doing with our community? What are we doing in serving others? What are we doing in formation? What are we doing in serving one another? And then as kind of a piece of that, what materials do we need? What facilities do we need to enable that? Any questions on that timeline? Okay, I'm going to keep going. So what did it take to do this? There are, of course, a number of pieces to this. The land cost us, that is our portion of the larger piece that was bought, cost about $1 million for 2.2 acres, roughly. The site development, the road, the drainage, the parking, the concept architecture, the landscaping was about $2.8 million. The building we did in phase one, which is the Parish Hall, the youth hutch, and so forth, was about $4.6 million to build, leading us to about $8.5 million total cost so far in the project. The money came from contributions from the parish, between $5 and $5.5 million. The sale of the Depot Hill site, which was actually the church property itself, the Parish Hall, and what we had adjacent, what was called the Little House, another little place on Depot Hill, together sold for about $2.7 million. And there was one significant outside gift of about $500,000, bringing the total again up to this $8.4 million to get us here. So that's what we've invested so far. And let's then talk about the more recent process here. In the Vision 2025 process, led by Mother Tracy and I think Liz Lindsley were closely involved. A lot of us went through this process of really discerning not only our gifts, but what were the pressing implications of our mission. And we identified these 5 strands: transforming lives through Christian formation, pastoral care, being a dynamic serving presence in the community, bringing together an abundance of resources and support for the vision, and creating life-giving spaces as an enabler for our mission. And we're really talking here about the role of spaces in order to enable the work that we're doing. I think there is on our website and elsewhere good write-up on the key, sorry about that, the key elements of that vision process. Shortly after that, the vestry then commissioned the Architecture and Space Use Committee to go do some further work. But before we go there, it's probably useful to look at what did we build and how did we build it. First, we went through the whole site planning and zoning and approval process. And this was a multi-year process. This was really non-trivial. And for zoning and planning, the county needs to understand what is the sum of everything that you're planning to do. And so we took the whole phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 plan to the county to get approval for that. That's significant because it was such an investment, and it lays down something of a template for moving forward. We don't have to do it what we said, but if we do more or less what we anticipated, stay within that envelope of uses, we don't have to go back to planning and zoning. So that would streamline things if we stayed within that broad outline of a plan. It also, we also built everything on the site: road, parking, landscaping, accessibility. And we built the phase 1 structure or structures. The Parish Hall, of course, we use it as our sanctuary as well, but it is really intended long-term to be a parish hall, and many of its facilities, like the ability to use folding walls to break it into to smaller rooms, really anticipates its multi-function use for small groups as well as big social gatherings. We built the sacristy, we built the library, the kitchen, that separate building that we've called the youth hutch. We built some, but not all, of the anticipated storage space. We put in all of the utilities for the full build out of the campus. So we sized the electricity and the heating and the water for that larger space. We built 4 restrooms, and we carved the nursery, the working nursery, actually out of a piece of the parish hall with a hanging wall. So you know where the nursery is in the parish hall. That wall is built to be removable with very little effort. It's not a structural wall at all, so that we can flex our use of the space as we needed to reclaim more parish hall as we move the nursery elsewhere. We put in place the trailer for temporary offices because we recognized that we would not have room for the secretary and the rector and the other staff in the building we were building. That was approved to stay temporarily until 2014 or 2015, which is kind of a problem in the sense that the trailer has overstayed its welcome with the county, and the county could, in theory, at any time come along and say, oh, that's non-conforming, it has to go next week. So we're particularly sensitive on that, and that's certainly one of the most urgent holes in our site use right now, is the fact that we're so dependent on the temporary trailer that's not really supposed to be there. We built the bell tower with generous gifts, and we put in a good part of the infrastructure for phases 2 and 3. As I mentioned, heating, power, water, sewers, of course, parking, and the other things that are particularly disruptive. A lot of the plumbing, for example, has been brought to the edge of what would likely be the construction area. There's sewer and power and water brought across the street to where the trailer is now, because that is the anticipated site for where we would build a sextant apartment and garage, so that we have that infrastructure there in anticipation, so we wouldn't have to, for example, tear up the driveway to put in, new sewer and water and power across behind us. So there's a lot of anticipation of it, but flexible enough that we can figure out how to adapt it to whatever we decide that we might build. Questions on this? So let's talk
I'm
about.
sorry,
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead, Dean.
I'm just curious, did we buy the land where the low income housing is? Is all the land, or did housing development help out with that?
They ultimately paid for it.
Oh, they did.
Yeah, we had an arrangement whereby we bought it with a contract for them to buy it from us, that for finance reasons, it was appropriate to do that. But that transaction in which they bought it and we completed the loan, completed the transaction is long gone. I don't remember the details, I'm afraid. And I'm not exactly clear, whether they bought it for us or we bought it for them, but the division was made back in the 90s to allow them to do their,
Okay, thanks.
or the early 2000s.
Okay.
Anne's taking a nap in the other room. She would know off the top of her head when
Chris,
that
Chris, do you think it's fair to say that, the way it was explained to me when I was interviewing here was that, that by the church partnering with the county on that the church was strongly advocating for the affordable housing, that the church is a big part of why those apartments and the townhomes exist here now. Would that be accurate?
They needed us to be part of the transaction to make it work. So our agreeing to it and getting into contract with them was a significant contributor to the low-income housing being built there.
Boy, that's impressive.
Yeah. So it was a wonderful process to watch, and I've put together a slideshow video that shows this process. So I'm going to switch over to this other video so that you can see in capsule form in about 9 minutes what it took. Okay, do you see that now?
Yay! Yes, and the good sound.
Is it full screen for you?
Close enough. Yeah.
Huge work to redo the drainage into the property when we discovered unusual sources of water. Working on the foundations, just a little bit of infrastructure.
It's hard to hear you because the music is too loud.
Very concrete. windows. Upper flashing. I think we can store 30,000 gallons. leaving the parking lot. The bell. Here we are marching from Capitola and Aptos down the beach. There we go. Thanks for your patience in my sorting out what was going on there.
That is posted on the website, right? So we can see it
Yes.
again.
Yes.
I just put a link in the chat to the specific page on the website where you can find all the task force stuff.
All right. That was the concentrated history from that intense period of the actual building. After that, we finished paying off the loans, and we recognized then, especially after the Vision 2025 process, that we needed to start thinking about what next. How could we take those missions and hopes and turn it into some kind of a functional set of requirements? And so there's a detailed report produced by the Architecture and Space Use Committee, chaired by John Showalter, which really gets at what are those functional needs? What is it that we do to build a dream, or to turn the abstract dream into a concrete dream of what we need to do in each of these areas, in worship, in education, in outreach, in fellowship, in administration. And that report has 97 bulleted recommendations with fairly extensive explanatory notes. Note that a functional requirements plan like this is not a description of what the building should look like, but what should it be able to do how should it serve our needs? And it provides the basis for further refinement with additional parish input to create instructions to an architect if we move forward, when we move forward. So that's available online, and I recommend looking at it because it's got lots of thinking about how do we interpret, for example, our communion circle as an architectural guidance. How do we look at the ways that we approach worship or the ways that we approach formation in a way that could be translatable into a design? We can also come at this by looking at what's missing from what we have right now. One of the most glaring areas is we have only that trailer for the rector, support staff, and volunteers. It should have been removed in about 2015, according to the plan with the county. We lack a properly equipped nursery. We lack classrooms for children and adult education or for hosting school initiatives. And we get approached periodically, kind of regularly, people who look at our presence here in the mid-county and say, this would be a great place for a school, but it's really hard for us to do it with the facilities we have right now. We lack spaces for small meetings, either for our own small groups or in support of community programs. We certainly lack a dedicated sanctuary space that makes it easy to realize our communion circle tradition or to host larger services or community performance events. It's hard to have hospitality in the same space that we're having worship, particularly hospitality setup almost always conflicts with services as it stands right now. So we're really pretty constrained the way we are right now. And we lack permanent accommodation for an on-site sexton. You know, we have another trailer, which is fundamentally temporary for our sexton. So we want to figure out, how do we solve these challenges? So what was the original plan? And I think it's worth talking through this, not because we have to do exactly what we said back then, but it's useful to understand what were we thinking? What were the kinds of functions and what was the kind of space that we had in mind? So here's a picture of the original phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 plan as approved by the county. And we can kind of color that in. Phase 1 is what we built, a bit over 5,000 square feet. It includes the Parish Hall, the youth hutch, and a bit of the utility and the storage. Not all of the utility and storage space we had in mind, but what we could do. It has the 4 restrooms here. It has the library. It has this space here, which became the temporary nursery, the kitchen, of course, storage here, 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 and here. Phase 2 is envisioned as this ring of classrooms and offices. It really follows the structure you see on the ground in the pavement. And we'll look at a Google Earth picture in a moment to confirm that. That's about 2,200 square feet of space. And there's the sanctuary, which is really, in a sense, is covering over the courtyard. You can think of the offices forming the walls, and then add a roof and you have a sanctuary. In fact, we, a few years ago, had the architect provide us with a set of walkthrough 3D animations of the spaces, interactive animations of the phase 2 and phase 3 space, so that people could start to get an idea of what it would be like to have more space, to be able to think about the separate spaces of the sanctuary and the office and the parish hall. And I'm going to now, technology willing, switch to those animations here. So let me stop sharing, reshare, and take up, oh gosh, should be here. Can you see that? No, not yet. Where did it go?
And see it, it's just not full screen.
It's just not full screen. How about now?
Yeah, that's good.
That works?
Mhm.
Wow.
Okay. So here are, this would be from the entry doors to the new sanctuary. So what you're looking at here is the outside wall of the current parish hall. So as you walk from the east, you come into the sanctuary and you can go through the sanctuary, through all of the existing doors into the parish hall. And we can look around a little bit in this space to see, get a sense of it, with this high ceiling that brings light from the sky and carries our prayers to heaven. This is looking from the center of the sanctuary space back towards the exit doors to the east, towards McGregor Drive. You can see here that there's a window space so that we could have, for example, a crying room, so people can be a little bit noisy if they have to, while still listening and watching the service. Around the edge here are windows that go into the classrooms around the outside and bring light into the classrooms. Here's the, again, the view of the parish hall. Here's more from the doors of the parish hall, looking out across that space. I don't think the plan doesn't actually show a clear window up here, but gives you an idea of some of the impact of this inspirational space that we could achieve. And somewhere behind this window, let's see, it's going to be a little tricky. I know this isn't full screen, but it's easier. Can you still see that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So this is a version of the crying room that might be sharing some space, perhaps with more of a wall, with the office space around the outside of this proposed ring of offices with windows out into the garden. And another one of the classroom spaces with its windows into looking up towards the ceiling and with windows or doors out into the garden areas. Not necessarily connected together like this. This is just a architect's conception of one way of doing it. But it gives you a little bit of a sense of it. And these are available online. The links are in the copy of the presentation, which is available to you. There's a PDF there. You can click on those in the PDF and it takes you yourself into a web browser, which allows you to navigate as you want. So you can move around in these spaces, zoom in and out to give a little bit of a sense of what this space might feel like. Any questions on this?
Yeah, I have one. I was wondering, okay, so this is a perfect shot to ask the question. The communion circle would go around the outside of the chairs?
Well, I mean, I think that we have to,
Or could
I think
be
it
closer
depends a
to
little
the,
bit on how many people are present
yeah.
on a given day.
I
And
feel like it could
we would-
also possibly go around the altar.
Yeah, so we think on small days, the circle might be right up here. I mean, this was
Yeah.
just the architect putting in some movable chairs.
Yeah.
I think the actual arrangement is something that we would adapt as we go along. But the idea here is that the altar and the ambo are sort of centrally located, and that we can really worship in the round. And this idea of having a space which is not this, long hall, but really is virtually a circle to start out with, makes it much easier for us to see one another, to sing together where we see one another, and to take communion together where we see one another. So this, acting in a circle, acting in a community, acting in this kind of non-hierarchical space is spiritually appealing to us.
So Liz, just to say a comment about the layout here in terms of the worship space, I think that if we had a round space, because I've been in another church that had a round space, my sort of conception of it, and this may not, obviously everything's movable, so it would be, it'd be an ongoing process, but the chairs, instead of being facing towards the front as they have put them in this design, would be more like facing each other side to side. And back where you see they've put the ambo, that actually I would say would be where the altar would be. And the ambo would be more like the vantage point from where we're standing in this picture. You would walk in the door and the ambo would be kind of right there, as it was when we were in the building pre-pandemic, where you walked in and it was kind of tight there. It didn't really work in a long, narrow space. But that arrangement, the idea of it came from a more circular space where you have, you walk in, there's the lectern on one end, there's the altar on the other end, and the chairs are sort of in a circle around those things. But if you have the altar in the middle of the circle, then some people are behind it. So if you have sort of like chairs, altar, ambo, then that helps it kind of all go in a circle. And then yes, ideally you'd stand up and walk around behind that group of chairs to form the communion circle, I would think, like the perimeter of the room kind of thing. Anyway, that's my thoughts of it as I've looked at this.
The architect was not thinking along the same lines we are.
Right. They just said chairs in a room.
Yeah, it's an audience. You just point them towards the front, and that's how it is.
Right.
And so, we could get another version which shows like what we want to have wherever we are.
And I think that a number of people have sort of played with different layouts. So you sort of start from this big, roughly circular space, and then you can play with the placement of the major things. There's not very much which is constrained in terms of where it gets placed. I mean, the organ probably has to be fixed in place because it doesn't move on wheels, but the chairs and the altar and the ambo are all pretty adaptable. So we get to create different kinds of things. And there may be different parts of the liturgical year when you want different representations of the dialogue or the relationship between the people and the celebrants. There are lots of things that become possible. I mean, part of the reason to move to individual chairs, rather than those of you who remember those great heavy pews back at the old St. John's, which sort of said, there is exactly one way to lay out this space. Thou shalt sit in the pew in a hall facing forward at the altar. You shall have no other arrangement but this.
Yeah, the possibilities of setting up the space differently is just, for me, very exciting. I mean, as a liturgist, I think it's really great thinking about what Chris just said about the ways in which you could set the space up differently in different liturgical seasons, or you could have like stations of different spots for Lent, or who knows. But there's just all kinds of creative, fun things that could be done when you have enough space to actually block that out. I think the parish hall space now is flexible, but because it's a long, narrow rectangle, it sort of limits how you can arrange things. So anyway.
Especially under COVID conditions.
Exactly. Yeah. All 12 people who can be in there. I'm just kidding.
Just a little bit more to talk about. I think that the parish has had tremendous support over time in the building of phase one, in envisioning the future. And part of that is reflected in the healthy amount of legacy gifts which have been designated for capital building. One parish family has been continuously giving to a fund held by the Episcopal Church Foundation on behalf of St. John's capital needs, that over the last 7 years has accumulated $3.5 million for this project. Another parishioner family has made an early promise of $500,000 to $1 million towards the phase 2 and 3 capital building project. So as a starting point for thinking about fundraising and building, if we decide to do fundraising and building, we're starting from $5 to $5.5 million. Now, we haven't decided to build, we haven't decided what to build. So of course we don't know what would it, whatever it is, cost. So, you can speculate, would we need $6 million or $7 million or $8 million? We don't know at this point. That question is a bit premature, but we have a significant starting point if we decide to move forward with building.